Good morning, everyone. How are you? Today is the 29th of Kislev, the last day of Kislev, the 5th day of Chanukah, and the 12th of December. We're holding by the third reading of Mikeitz, and we ended last time with a question, a little bit of a challenge, how to understand the connection between the Torah portion and the reading, the selection from the prophets, which tells us about the dream that Solomon had after he was anointed king, and he asked God for wisdom, and then he went back to Jerusalem, and there two women came to him, and their story was that they had both given birth on the same day to a child, and it was a couple of weeks later, and one of the children passed away in their sleep, and the mother of the child who had passed away had exchanged her baby for the one that was her friend's baby. And now they came before Solomon asking him to try this and to tell them whose baby is whose. Who has the dead baby, who has the live baby. And Solomon, as probably everybody knows, is a very famous thing called Solomon's trial. So he says, instead of, in any kind of court case, you have to bring witnesses, you have to bring proof, something, my baby has a birthmark, it has this, and so on. Something that only the mother could know. And Solomon does something which doesn't seem to follow any of the rules of judicial review. And he says, okay, take the baby and cut it in half and give each one a half. And then one of the women breaks down crying and says, don't do it, give it to her, he can be her baby. And Solomon says, to everybody's astonishment, of course, that the baby should be given to that woman, the one who wanted to save the child at any price, even if she wouldn't be able to raise him. So there seems to be a very interesting psychological twist on how to figure out who is more connected to something. And when it comes to a child, obviously the mother will go to any extreme to have him survive. But remember, we said that when they come before Solomon, the prophet used the same word that we said that Pharaoh saw in his dream, that the decrepit cows, as they came up, they stood right next to the healthy cows. And the same thing happened with the ears of produce. And the question was why? And we said that Joseph used that as a sign that part of the dream was also telling Pharaoh that the way to survive the famine would be to prepare for it during the years of plenty. And so basically what he was understanding from this was Joseph's take from the dream, is that the present had to contain two contradictory realities. The one being plenty, the one being famine. And they had to exist together in the mind of whomever was going to make sure that Egypt survived the 7-year famine. So this word vata'amodna is the same word that's used to describe the two women that come before before Solomon. And it says they stood before him together. So if we follow something called a gzera shava is one of the 13 linguistic principles by which we learn the Torah. What it means basically is that words are linked. There's like a hyperlink between words that are similar. And you can learn not only the meaning. We usually understand that, like in a dictionary, the way we define a word is we look at its usage somewhere else. But here the idea is, in gzera shava, in this type of linguistic principle, that you're not only learning the meaning of the word, you're also learning things that are, I would say, higher than the meaning how the word appears in context and what is it trying to get across. In our case, we said that they stood means that the two should be together. The years of plenty and the years of famine. They should be in the mind at the same time. You should hold the paradoxical image. How would we apply that to Solomon's court case? Well, we could say something of the same nature, that these two women were together, not just because they came together, not just because they lived together. I think the dead giveaway is that they say that they gave birth on the same night. And why do I say it's a giveaway? Because that's really uncommon. That two women, even if they would be living together, should give birth on the same night. So what does that mean about... I think that this is not the literal meaning of the text, but I think it's definitely something the text can carry in terms of its meaning. That what the writer of the prophets is telling us is that there are not two women here. There's actually just one. And she is experiencing what, in their time, I don't know what they called it. They probably didn't have a name for it. But today we would call it postpartum depression. And what it feels like is that on the one hand, you have one side of you that wants to nurture and take care of the child, and there's another side of you that literally wants to throw it out the window, can't stand it, doesn't want the child at all. And postpartum depression can be that difficult for the person experiencing it. And so Solomon here is not just, Bracha just wrote, grief and gratitude at the same time. And it's a very, it's almost like having a split personality. Like you don't know who you are. Am I this one or that one? And Solomon's solution to this very difficult condition is to take it to an extreme. Meaning asking, which one do you prefer? The grief or the gratitude? If it's the grief, okay, let me put you out of your misery. I have the power as the king to cut the baby, to kill him, which is part of what you want to do. But if that's what you're faced with, then you have to decide which way you want to go. And it seems to bring back her coherence, or at least, I don't know if it was like a quick fix, but at least convince the mother to bring out her motherly instinct, which was the baby needs to be saved in any case. Even if my other side is content with letting it die. I mean, that's an amazing thing. Imagine you're standing there and there's two women, and one is saying, I don't care what happens to the baby, and meaning not just I don't care, I know the baby's going to die, and the other one says, I have to do whatever I can to save the baby. I mean, just imagine that. How could that even play out in two women? It's almost difficult to imagine something like that actually occurring. Which is why when I thought of this, I really felt that the prophets was trying, the book of Kings where this shows up, he was trying to tell us this is not a regular instance of something happening. This is a special case. It's not tried like a court case. It's actually looked at like a psychological case, like something that needs to be healed in some way. And the moment that the mother heard, and what I'm assuming here is the moment she heard from herself, from her insides, that what is stronger is her motherly instinct to take care of the baby, that began the process of healing. So that was something that we carried over from yesterday. Today, we find that after Pharaoh appoints Joseph to be his advisor and his viceroy, he gives him a name. He calls him Tzafnat Pa'aneach, which most people say means the one who reveals secrets, or the one who can interpret secrets. But the people called him Avrech. The people of Egypt, when he came out, they called him Avrech. And this name, Avrech, is very interesting. There's a long Rashi on it, trying to explain exactly what this is. Let me just say it in English. He had him ride through the capital city next to his own chariot. This is something Pharaoh did for Joseph in his second royal chariot, and they proclaimed before him, the king's counselor, how wise he is for his young age. So that's the first meaning. the king's counselor. Avrech is like the father of the king. Father is always wisdom. So what he's saying here, he's the wisdom of the king. He's the one who advises him. The second one is how young he is, or how wise he is for his young age. That's the second explanation. He is wise in his years. It's as if he's a wise old man, but he's young in his age. And so this is like sort of a paradox. He's as wise as an old man, but he is young. And then the third explanation is that people bow down to him, or at least they would bend their knees to Joseph. So Avrech in that sense comes from the word berich. Berich in Hebrew is a knee. So take the knee. It's like Avrech would be like take the knee, meaning every time that you would see him, you would bend your knee before him. So when you think about it, these three meanings, they're actually like the Baal Shem Tov's usual division into submission, separation, and sweetening. Obviously, the first one, that people would bend down before him, so that is the submission. The fact that he is a paradoxical character here, that he is both old and young, he's both wise and of young age, that's always separation. So separation is something of a I think I got it wrong. I think I got it wrong. The second meaning, the separation, is that he is a wise and he is Pharaoh's advisor. He's something above everyone else. Separation means that he's different than everyone else. And he's different in the sense that now he is the second in command, but not only that, he is also Pharaoh's advisor. And the third meaning, the sweetening, is that he's both wise in his knowledge, as if he's an old man, and he's also young in years. Sweetening is always a state of paradox of two things joining together. So, what would we say about this if we ask the question? So, what is this really trying to tell us here? That when Joseph assumes this new position, it's a complete transformation within him. Because these stages of submission, separation, and sweetening, what they indicate is that the person, in order to assume, in order to become something new, has to go through three separate stages. The one stage says you have to submit. There has to be some element of submission here. And the submission here, in this case, actually came from the people. And then you have to have some element of separation. We said that's the fact that he is different than everyone else. He is Pharaoh's advisor. And finally, there has to be a state of sweetening. The sweetening here, the paradox, is really what Joseph is going to be doing now. And we'll end with this thought. He's going to be taking the plenty of the 7 years, of the good 7 years, and he's going to be transforming them into something that can survive the famine. How do you actually do that? That's the real question. How do you get grain, or whatever it is that you're collecting, to keep for 7 years? Think about it. This is an incredibly difficult question. Rashi has one explanation that he gives today in today's reading. He says that the way you ensure that grain keeps is that you have to take some of the dirt from where the produce grew and store it with the grain itself. Meaning that the dirt itself is what will keep it. And that's a very interesting thing. We need to discuss it at some point, but not now. What I want to focus on is that Yosef is faced, like anyone faced with a new duty, with a new title, with something that they need to do. Everybody's faced with the need to solve a new problem that's never been solved before. This was the real question. How do you do this? And we'll see in the continuation of the Parsha, but actually we begin to see it now, that Joseph is first of all taking the grain, but then we can assume that something happened. What happened caused him to have to search for a solution, because apparently the grain that was collected in the first year began to rot. And he had to find a solution. To need to find a solution is the point where a person is faced with the challenge of taking on the new position. And it means that you have to invent something new. You have to reinvent yourself, but you also, the way that you reinvent yourself is you reinvent yourself through solving a problem that hasn't been solved before. And we're going to see that Joseph has an incredible solution that nobody ever thought of. Again, Rashi here says that he took from the earth and he mixed it into the grain. But later on we'll see that he does something else. And the something else that he does, I'm just going to end with this, is he takes 20% of the produce from the people. He doesn't take all of it, only 20%. Now this will become a very important solution to everything that we do. In fact, today, when we say to someone comes and says, I have enough money, I'm making enough, and so on, but for some reason, everything that I'm making, I also spend. I can't keep anything as savings. I haven't been able to make investments. Meaning, the grain is rotting. I'm making, it's years of plenty. I have plenty to go around, but I can't ensure my future. I haven't been able to make investments. We say to him, give 20% to charity. This 20%, and we'll see where Joseph learned this from, because he had to learn it from somewhere, but these 20% that you're going to be giving are what are going to preserve the rest of what you have. And this is an incredible teaching that we learn from Joseph. We're going to see it again in the 6th reading, and we'll get more into it then. But this was the problem that he needed. This is somebody once told me, every American president is faced with a problem that no one ever was faced before. It's like 4 years is enough to give you that defining moment where you have to face something. And we know that, for instance, in recent history, so if you remember, when I was a young child, it was Carter, and he was suddenly faced with the revolution in Iran, and with the hostages that they had there for 400 days. So it was most of his, and he lost the re-election because of that, to a large degree. And the amazing thing was that the day that, I believe it was a day that Reagan was inaugurated, was a day in which they arrived in the United States. They were released. You need to check the dates exactly. And every single one, I mean, obviously, George W. Bush's thing was 9/11, and every one of them had it. In really recent history, Trump had COVID, and now Biden has 2 wars that have never been fought like this: an actual war with Russia, and I don't know if he knows what to do with it. And these are defining moments. If you can't find the solution to these things, you lose your status. You cannot continue. So Joseph is now going to be faced with this, and this was his solution. We haven't seen all of it yet. He's going to try a number of things to solve this problem of preservation. So we'll take a look at those during the rest of the week. Thanks for joining, even though it was later today. Thanks for coming back, and hope to see you tomorrow.
Thanks, John.